This is the recording of the Coast Division Saturday virtual event recorded August 8th, 2020, 9 to 11 a.m.
Welcome to the Coast Division August 8th virtual event. Now we're going to hear from Steve Van Meter, who's going to talk to us about his layout and how it's changed as he adapted it for operations. Steve, over to you.
Okay, during the 2000 convention, my layout was on the tour, and my layout is basically at that time just a big circle, and it still is. Mulford, which is, there's a swinging gate that would enter into the layout room, and to your left was a town called Mulford, which is San Leandro. Then I had staging, which would feed into the main line, and Jingletown, which is a place in Oakland that would feed into the main line. Then Oakland, which is the main yard on the layout. And then I have an, if you go to the, from Oakland, you come down the next row and there was a loop, and it is reminiscent of the Tehachapi Loop, but I wanted a loop even though it was near Oakland, and it sits on top of a helix that led to stub tracks that I'd used in eventual development of the railroad. It then went on to Fraser, which is actually and it may be spelled wrong, but it's part of the Santa Fe, but it was a scenic area up there just beyond, oh God, I forget the name of the canyon, on the other side of the hill on Highway 4. Then just before the convention, I was urged by a friend, Earl Vasconcelos, to connect Fraser over to Tracy, which was above my workbench, so that I had a complete circle around the layout. And then there was an old layout that I called Roseville that branched off Tracy. So that, it was just a layout that I kind of built like Topsy. After the convention, I got more and more interested in ops, and had some of the heavyweights like Seth and Pat Latoris and Dave Parks come down and operate on my layout, and it was somewhat of a catastrophe. But Bill Kaufman came back a couple weeks later and sat down with me for an afternoon, and he said, you know, you need a transportation system, not a layout. And as a result of that, I sold off a lot of my UP stuff, separated the SP from the WP, and renamed a couple of towns. And that also involved me having to build some staging yards. And so I started outside the layout room, and you can see in the left-hand side, this is basically the Mulford line running from San Jose through a little town kind of made up by me, Robert, which used to be Robert's Landing, just south of San Leandro, into Mulford. And then what was my staging, I turned into the mole for passenger trains. Jingletown remained the same. Then we come down the next row and we have Oakland. And there are a lot of, I'll bring up this later, but there are a lot of modifications I did to my Oakland Yard. And this is not prototypical, it's proto-Lance. So the other side of Oakland becomes the Roper line that goes back south. So you go from the south into Oakland and then back south again over the loop. Fraser was changed to Fruitvale. The Alameda Beltline came off the Fraser turn. And then what was Earl, former Earl, became Altamont. And then Tracy over my workbench became Tracy Lathrop. And I changed my swing out gate to a lift bridge for two reasons. One, the gate, and we'll get into that pretty soon, the gate would swing in front of the Mulford guys that were doing the Mulford turn and interfere with their work. And also I wanted to build a Y at Tracy Lathrop so that I could accommodate some operations from Stockton to Tracy Lathrop, where we needed to turn the Sacramento Daylight to tack on to the San Joaquin Daylight. So the railroad goes from Altamont, Tracy, Lathrop, Stockton, and then over to Sacramento Staging. The WP was, I had to build a staging loop underneath the town of Livermore. And then from there, we go to the Oakland Yard, which I mentioned in the WP Oakland Yard, which I mentioned earlier in the first diagram, was my stub tracks. The WP comes up the helix, shares track with the SP on the way to Fruitvale, then goes from there by a PG&E yard, which is fictional, on the way to Niles Canyon, up this peninsula to the town of Livermore, across Altamont Pass, and over to Tracy to interchange with the SP, and a crossing of the SP, and then goes into the into the other room outside the layout to the town of Stockton, and then to Sacramento Staging. After that first operation session, or one of the first ones, I found out that a lot of my, I just had AD tracks, arrival departure tracks on my Oakland Yard, and a lot of them were microengineering and not DCC friendly. I converted to DCC, I think, after the convention. And so I had to change all those turnouts to more DCC friendly, and the geometry had to be improved. I had to add classification tracks, reverse loop for pig trains and passenger trains, and I'll explain that about the pig trains. They all come to Oakland with the fifth wheel facing toward Oakland because they were all loaded circus style. And then as they left Oakland, the pig train, the pig train would run from LA up to Portland, and the pig train actually had to be turned in Oakland because a lot of the pig ramps didn't have turning facilities, Ys or turntables. So that's the reason for reversing the pig trains. I needed a roundhouse for future steam operations, and I need a passenger car yard for services. Dave Parks has said several times in our layout design and OPSIG meetings that to make layouts that are operational fun, you need, he's very straightforward, switches that switch and couplers that coupler. And I, after every operating session, there's always a switch that shows up, and that's something you can correct, usually when you're restaging the railroad. Couplers that couple. I haven't solved this problem because I have and I think everybody has, some kind of evil leprechaun on their layout that goes around changing the coupler heights between op sessions. Here's a picture of the yard as it in Oakland as it exists now. And the original yard is just these 6 tracks back here. And I had to rebuild all these. This is a thoroughfare track, track number 6. My tracks are usually labeled 1 near the wall and get sequentially higher. And so I had to add on to all the arrival and departure tracks with all these a double-ended classification yard. And the advantage I have is I was more or less permanently located here in Alameda. So my bench work is pretty rugged. And to quote Tony Custer, somebody asked him why he used 3/4 inch plywood, and he says, because they don't make 1 inch plywood. And it's easy to add on to a rugged bench work and modifying it. But most of us nowadays are more mobile, and we're inclined toward modular style railroads. My next, my next slide just shows a better view of the classification tracks. And this slide here shows my reverse loop that comes around off the main line and onto the thoroughfare track in the yard. And you can see the roundhouse here. And I think the next slide will show the engine facilities. Near you is a foam core mock-up of the paint shop where diesels were serviced up until they tore this paint shop down a few years ago. And back here is a roundhouse for steam. We haven't really included steam in the ops yet, but it's coming down the line, and I'll probably add a job for a hustler to handle the steam on the railroad. But right now we're still that kind of dormant at this stage in the game. We use steam on a lot of the mainline trains, but steam in N-scale is tough because it's hard to crowd in a speaker and keep alive in a lot of those engines. The next slide shows a commissary, railroad express, post office, a boiler house behind it to supply this area. And this services the mail train on the layout. Okay, I'll flip on. The next thing I needed staging yards. Now, this wasn't all done in a time sequence. I did different things at different times. I needed to build a LA San Jose staging, which was outside the layout room, and Sacramento staging outside the layout room, and WP staging underneath the Livermore, town of Livermore. And I changed, as I mentioned earlier, my previous staging into the mole for passenger trains. So here's my layout. We have cats in our house, and that's door skins covering the staging yard. And it's over a sink. And here it is, just a stub-in staging yard. And here's the next view, a little hole going into the layout room, and the doors here to the right is open. And when my cats were thin, I used to put a can of soup there to keep them out of the layout room, but now they're too fat to get in. So that's LA staging. Here's Sacramento staging, and this is the SP yard here, and this is a reverse loop with what will eventually be mostly WP yard. And I had to build my loop staging for the WP underneath the town of Livermore, which is a peninsula. And I built the whole staging yard. It's just a loop, 2 loops, and all my switches for that staging are just outside so that's visible and accessible to me. So trains come in and go counterclockwise, and I have kill areas so I can store 4 trains in there, kind of elephant style. And my former staging is now the mole, although I don't have a mole building. And here to the right is Jingletown, which is a small switching area, and I have a maintenance away train sitting there. Okay, I had to convert the swing gate to a drop gate, as I mentioned earlier, so I wouldn't interfere with the operators at Mulford and I could have my Y. So here's some quick shots of that. Here's the swing gate going up and down. And you see this wall here. The swing gate used to swing over to the right toward, you can see the edge of Mulford here. And this prevents us from interfering with the Mulford crew, and when people have to get out or follow their train around the layout, they're not disturbing them. And it also allows me to, and this is only partially scenic, I'm just working on this part now, this Y, and I think this is Tracy Lathrop, and the ground there, I put in some hills, but I think it's flat as a tabletop there over at Tracy in reality. And here's another view of that Y, and you can see Stockton in the background. So that's one of my problems. Then, oops, sorry, I get you sick here. I had to convert Roseville to Livermore and change this from an SP town to a WP town. And it's an old layout from the 70s that I've rebuilt about 3 times and added on to my layout. And I got rid of the reverse loop at the top of the town and made it a through town to Altamont. I also added a shelf between Fraser and Tracy so I could have both the WP and the SP cross Altamont. So here's the old SP town, which I converted to Livermore, which it looks like this today. And we have the railroad. You see Niles Canyon here to the left. It's just a big helix going around a couple of times, coming up to Livermore. This is a stand-in station. Someday I'll build a real WP station. And it comes around the layout here by the brick factory warehouse. An icing plant is hidden by the warehouse. It goes around, and you can see on the upper level there the WP starting to go across Altamont. And here's looking, you can see the Greenville trestle coming out of Livermore and heading on over to Altamont. Now this is what it looked like before. I just had one track connecting Fraser with Tracy, and this was the SP line. And this is it now. Up above I have the WP line, and down below I have the SP line. And contrary to a lot of layout design, I have this WP is kind of, in a way, hiding the SP, but it turns out kind of neat. And I've developed a switching area there for Altamont. This is Proto-Lance. I don't claim that it's really what things are like there, but at least it provided an area for another switch job on my railroad. And here's a view. We're standing over near Tracy, and you can see the two railroads coming up to grade above my workbench at Tracy Lathrop. And I had to change Tracy to Tracy Lathrop, and again, because of a fairly rugged bench work I could build out and build an interchange yard and have two entrances to Stockton, one for the WP and one for the SP. Here's the old kind of top view of the Tracy shelf. There were just 4 tracks there. And here it is now. And you see I've added some a pig ramp over there. And near you here, you can see the WP going through the wall into the room on the other side of the layout. And here near the aisle or over my workbench is the interchange yard for the WP with the SP. And there's these are the SP tanks at Tracy. And here's the loading facility where in that yard for the tank cars. And here's another view. You can see the pig ramp back behind the arrival and departure tracks for the SP. And I don't think you can see it too well, but there's a house track and a kind of a station for the Tracy Lathrop station. And then here at the end of that Tracy Lathrop area is the exit for the SP into the other room going towards Stockton. And here's the SP layout is the track line is the track nearest you, and the WP is the track that's just inside there. And this is an agricultural area that I built so I can have another switching job for the Stockton area. And so there are packing houses, and these are mock-up packing houses except for the one in the back over there, which I actually built the kit for. And this is, you can see the orange grove here on the left. And then one of my hobbies is we have a winemaking group on our street. And so I have a vineyard there in Stockton. And this little water tower here was in Model Railroader a couple of years ago. And I scratch built that because it's kind of a signature California scene. So I've got some switching there in Stockton. And here's another view of the other side of Stockton, just a peninsula sticking out there. During COVID-19, I'm building the Alameda Beltline, which will provide another switching area and a kind of comfortable area to work because it's off the main line, and a guy that can just have fun there. Here to the left is the Del Monte building, and I can accommodate about 16 cars there on both tracks. Right in front of you is a mock-up of US Steel, and over to the right there, I've got to modify it as an old Pennzoil was on the Alameda Beltline. And over here someday I have a signature building, which was the engine house. That's a mock-up. And the Alameda Beltline received a ferry from the Alice Street Yards probably that held 8 cars. so they could interchange with the WP and the Santa Fe. So that's a work in progress right now. And this is just some another view further down. You can see the PG&E plant there. And I just put in these tracks for the hopper cars. So PG&E is finally going to be able to get some coal. And this here building, I call it an American Box Company, is just a kit bash of a kit bash to disguise the entrance into the helix. And I think that's it. So I kind of sailed through that.
That was great. That was absolutely great, Steve. I think it's really interesting to see how you adapted to such a different scheme, and made the changes. It's any other questions, comments?
I have a bunch of pictures, but I think it would take up too much time of showing a train going over the layout, but maybe that's for another day.
That's one beautiful job there, Phil. Just beautiful.
Steve, somebody is asking, because they missed the beginning of it, as did I, how large of a space is this?
I think the room's about 45 feet long, and down here where we're standing, it's about 20 feet wide, but it's kind of L-shaped. And then a lot of the layout, staging and all is outside this room.
Thank you.
But it's been fun. I envy you guys that are doing all these modules, because you've got to get it right the first time. It seems like, particularly, I don't know, I've never built a modular layout, but using foam and whatnot, you got to take into consideration all your scenery, what you're going to do in the way of operations. And I'm kind of a slow learner. I have to learn by trial and error. And I think the one thing everybody says that I didn't do is you ought to start operating, if you have any inclination for it, sooner rather than later, so that it would probably make it easier building your further modules down the line.
Steve, how do your switch machines work?
All different ways. I got about 125 or 150 that are tortoise, and like Steve Williams said one day, you can't kill a tortoise with a stick. I have hand thrones here at Alameda just because I'm getting old and I didn't want to go through the trouble of laying on my back under the layout, sticking them up through. And also I just wanted this area to be a little different than all the rest of the layout. I have on the old layout, which is Livermore, I have Pico solenoids, and that's only because that layout started out that way back in the 70s. And I have to have two guys do that switch job because I got control panels with push buttons on either side of that peninsula, and so they have to talk back and forth to one another to do their opping. It's more efficient that way. But if I had my druthers, I wouldn't have any solenoids at all. Andy Schnurr on his layout has some solenoids, but he put latching relays onto them so that you can flip a switch and they go back and forth and you don't burn them out. But so I have everything. I have blue points over in that LA staging yard just because I didn't want to run the electricity out to it. They're just kind of, blue points are just kind of like a choke cable onto a double pull, double throw switch. So I got everything.
If I might just mention about the idea of modular, as many of you probably have seen at various shows, my entire layout is modular. Some of those modules go back 40 years and were built by Jim Fitzgerald. And one thing I do sometimes is to rebuild a module. And I've got a couple of modules that just this past week, I've gone in and modified slightly so that they are updated to my new wiring system and everything. So the nice thing about that is that if you do need to rebuild a section of the layout, you simply remove it, take it to the workbench and work on it, and the rest of your layout is still fully operational.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, how many operators do you usually have in an operating session? And how often did you operate with pre-COVID days?
We were going around 13, including me, the layout owner, where I just run around correcting mistakes, and dispatcher. I might be able to accommodate a few more down the line, as we only run 2 trains on the WP right now. That's a local that comes out of Tracy and goes to Livermore, and the California Zephyr we have leaving from the mole and going over the WP to Stockton. And we operate, God only knows, maybe every 2 to 3 months the last year or two. But the other thing I find that's interesting for me is the resets are almost as much fun as the op session, and it gives the owner a chance to run trains backwards and find problems and correct them.
Cool. Any other, so with that, Steve, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. Appreciate it very much. Everybody, if you get the reactions, we can all give a hand to Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So kind of the thought process was, this is a great time to kind of stop and show modeling and talk about what folks have been doing. I think I showed some stuff earlier before we actually started the recording, so I won't do that again, but anybody been working on anything exciting this last couple of weeks? Been excited by NMRA-X, the Gateway X, and go out and do some great modeling?
Do any modeling. I've been working on a field platform I've been building for about a month and a half now, and it's just been in the morning as I'm making my tea. So I finally got the last of the nut bolt washer castings installed. So it's moving slowly, but those little buggers take a lot of work to put them in, even in no scale. So now I'm going to have to nudge back over towards my FN3 car that I'm working on, my passenger car, and get the upholstery on the seats and things.
Cool. Anyone else got anything exciting?
I've been working on the Keep Alive we discussed about a month ago, and I have a prototype out with Guy Cantwell, who seems to have, there he is. And I'm told it's working well.
Cool.
Come up with
yes,
a model.
It does work. It works exactly as a regular current keeper that you would buy at the store works or the TCS. Exactly the same. Very nice product.
Oh, thank you. Cool. So
and actually, so 2 weeks from now, I asked Seth to come in and just talk a little bit about it. And Guy, you guys together, it'd be great if you talk about kind of how you install it. And, you know, because I think everybody's done the ones where you buy one from Soundtracks and you follow their instructions, but it's a little different. Yeah, there it is. You guys can't tell I'm managing content to push Seth off for 2 weeks, so there's content for 2 weeks from now. So everybody understands what I'm doing.
Oh, no.
Why I'm pushing. It's by the way, if you saw what Steve did, if anyone wants to do the same thing, basically over the next 2 weeks, take 20, 30 pictures of your layout, bring them in just like Steve did, and walk through them and talk about your layout, talk about design. It's a great way to do it. It's not, I think it's a lot better than the video because it lets us talk about it and really discuss it. So if anyone's interested, send me an email and we'll go from there. Anyone else got anything interesting?
You know, I hate to say this, but as you probably remember, my layout's in the attic, and it's summer, and it's hot as a bitch, and I'm trying to air condition it, and I'm thinking about putting in a window air conditioner as opposed to a split screen. If anybody offline has any thoughts about this, get in touch with me. I'd like to just, go back and forth about anybody's success on trying to air condition a really weird space that gets hot as.
You could always use a Sawzall, but it'd probably be a bit of a bear come winter time. Just open a hole in the ceiling.
It's not of great benefit in the next 6 weeks or 4 weeks, but we bought one of those floor ones for our bedroom that was, it was $350, but they were selling it for $100 at the end of September 1 year. And it's got a hose on the back, and put that through a window, and that might work really well because you put it under the layout and blow out. Anyway, yeah, I'll send you something. But
I don't want to take any time.
No, it's cool. It's cool. But yeah, we can always cut this out too. I can,
That's well, it should be.
Industrious, I can go back and edit some of anything out. So, Earl, you have to
more weathering.
Something. Oh, there we go. Go out.
No, I was going to say, I did a little bit more weathering on some of my N-scale stuff, but it's probably not exciting enough to talk about. Just using powders, no big deal.
Oh, that's cool.
How you learn.
That's how everybody, that's great. Everybody sharing and learning is great.
Yeah, basically what I did was I have a few pieces of rolling stock that I'm intending to make a video about, showing me weathering some of this stuff for my YouTube channel. And I wanted to practice on the spare, the extras that I had that are duplicates before I make a fool of myself showing a video of me screwing something up, So, but they turned out pretty good. One of them was a bit heavier than I really wanted it, but, like Pat just said, and it's true, you only learn how to do this stuff by doing it, so.
Exactly.
Hey, Phil, I've been doing something I haven't done before, which is I tore into a $300 Craftsman kit and kind of am kit bashing it. So I should have some pictures next week or next meet.
All right. Craftsman kit bashing. That's living dangerously.
Well, I needed a corner building, and I was going to build a building with the Walters modulars, but all the seams stand out in this brick building and I couldn't live with it. So I went back to the closet of kits and found a large size Craftsman kits from Foss from a few years ago. So we'll look at that in 2 weeks maybe.
So maybe, Earl, that's the definition of when a model is really done, is when you can live with it.
Could be. Yeah, I couldn't live with the other one.
If you can't live with it, it's never done. Okay, that's good. Like that. Hey, Ken, I think you're not muted, but your mic's not on.
Thank you. Does that come through now?
Now you're good now. Excellent.
Okay. Well, all right. To follow up on about a month ago, I actually bought one of the local Phi units and installed it.
Oh,
and
cool.
I've got it working off track power, off my old NCE SB3A unit. And but it's going on to the next stage now, where I'm going to get some LiPo batteries and go completely dead rail with it.
Cool. Does it work reasonably? I mean, it'd be great. Maybe when we get together 2 weeks from now, if you could like do maybe a 5-minute just kind of review of it, what you learned, it'd be absolutely. So that was, I mean, I thought it was a really cool product, but I've been betting other stuff, but it's great to have somebody test it. It'd be great to have you do that.
wasn't the easiest thing because it turned out the problem was with the router, my Wi-Fi router, which was a dual band.
Right.
And it kept getting confused as to whether it was on the 2.4 or the 5 point
The 5 gig. Yep.
channel. So it had to, I had to straighten that out. And what I finally wound up doing was just buying a little Fire tablet.
Yep.
For $40 total, and putting it on there and making sure that was dedicated to the 2.4.
Right. And are you still going through the router then, or are you going direct to the engine?
No, it's going to through the router.
Okay. Yeah, you know, that so that was kind of one of the things that really intrigued me about that, because there's so many folks that are operationally focused, was the idea you could have a couple of engines that you had that in that you could directly connect to, take to an operations meet, get the power off the layout, but run them yourself.
Yeah, I don't know about the I just haven't figured out how to make the Fire tablet communicate directly
to it. I think you have to go on the Wi-Fi and you have to actually connect directly. But it's an interesting technology. For anyone who wasn't on, there's actually a video on, you know, we have a YouTube channel. So everybody knows if you just go on YouTube and search NMRA Coast Division, you'll get the Coast Division YouTube channel. And I put some videos up there. Anything anybody wants to put up there, we can put up there. So there is a video up there about the Loco-Fi when he came in and talked to us. So cool.
The other thing I've been working on is basically talking about mock-ups that Steve was doing. Doing a lot more mock-ups for my Port Costa. I've got a full, if I can't share screens here, but the full section house that went behind the station. I've rebuilt the freight house, and now I'm going on to a rebuild of the actual station building, with rebuilding the mock-up first, and then eventually going into the actual full construction. So somebody gave me, fortunately, the 1930 SP proposed rebuild of Port Costa, the diagram. They'd gotten it from the CSRM, and I was about ready to try and order the whole bunch of stuff from the CSRM, and somebody said, "Oh, here, I've got this." Gave me a JPEG for the plan. And one of the things I learned from the plan, it was what the length of the building for the station was not, they had in the plan, was not what they built. The plan showed it to be 106 feet long. It's a long linear thing, 15 feet wide and 106 feet long. Well, the actual one was only 85 feet. Ron Plays actually went out and measured the foundation for it before they tore it out.
So the question is, did somebody build a smaller building and pocket the difference? Did somebody build, in other words, did somebody think they were building a 110-foot building, somebody built an 85-foot building, and some group of people pocketed the difference in cost? Or was that, be an interesting question about whether it was an active, so either one of two things happened. Somebody decided we don't need that big a station, let's make it smaller before it was built, or something else happened.
Well, the thing to do was to go through and compare photos of the actual building as built to the plan to figure out what they'd chopped out.
Yep.
And so you got the windows right and everything else.
Oh, that's amazing. Cool.
Anyway, it was a lot of fun. I haven't got anything else to do, seeing as I rarely even go out of the house these days.
An interesting point that Kim brought up is, again, the California State Railway Museum, library is still functioning, so you can contact them online, and I would guess probably by phone if you called in the day, and arrange to get information if you know sort of what you're looking for. The librarians there are very effective, and they will help you find materials you want. When I was going to build the fruit bale depot, and I still hope to build a module of that at some point in time, I went in and went through and said, I'm looking at these items that I'm interested in. The librarian came back and said, well, here's 5 other drawings that you might be interested in, one of which was a 1/4 inch to the foot plan looking straight down on the building, which I had not in their collection. So I got, got a bonus out of it. And by the same token, if you're modeling either prototype or even proto freelance based on something that really existed, they can get a lot of information for you. It's a very, very good resource. And yeah, you can't schedule a train trip for it right now because everything else is a mess. But it's a great resource and it's worth looking at. Also, historical societies for the appropriate railroads are really, really useful.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll have to try and get Pat. Sometime I'm very hard of hearing, and you didn't come through clearly, so that was okay. We'll.
That's my fault. 'Cause I'm using the microphone on the computer, and it's probably marginal at best.
Yeah.
Cool. James, I think James has something to show. So.
We're not hearing you, Jim.
Jim, we're not hearing you.
We see you, but we can't hear you.
Not yet.
Maybe sign language?
You are not showing us. We did, cutting shingles.
So I just spotlighted Jim, so at least we can see. But go ahead, Jim, bring it back so we can see. Yep. Oh, cool. Pull it back just a little bit more. It's a little yeah, that's there. That's great.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Hey. Oh, well, that was unfortunate on the sound there. Oh, well. Anyone else have anything else to jump, or do we? So I was planning on doing a thing on how you can print interiors for your buildings and go through that real quick. If anyone's interested, if anyone wants to drop off, we save that till last. And I think Earl had some things he also had done doing kind of the same kind of technique. So he's going to jump in and talk about that. So unless there's something else, we'll just go ahead and jump into that. Does that make sense? Cool. So I'm going to share a screen and jump over here, slideshow mode. So this is actually, I actually put this together because this was something I did, and after I did it, I decided it probably would be interesting. So this is a DPM resin and Eleanor's house kit on an ON30 module. The track's at 48 inches. It's a model of the Mission Hill Tunnel in Santa Cruz. And the tunnel it goes through the hill, and on top of the hill is the church, which is the right. You really can't see it. And I put this house up there, Victorian houses up there. It's kind of a bit of a proto-Lansing of the area. The problem is that literally, if you are 5'6", when you stand here, you're looking into the building. And because it's a module, you're never more than a foot away. And if you lean in, you can get 4 or 5 inches away from the windows. So it really needed an interior, and the details are going to be very visible. So this is actually what I did. This is actually the interior of the building. The furniture is doll kit furniture. There's a figure there. It's 148, so you can do that. But all of the walls were all printed as a single print, cut and just glued on the walls. And if you look at this in the big room here, the big area in the front is actually treated as a single room where the walls were printed and glued on the outside on the resin. And then that center wall, if you look, you can actually see that's just a piece of balsa with 2 pieces of wood glued on the sides. But everything you see inside, there are some of those doily curtains on some of the windows, but everything else is actually just printed on the walls. So literally doing this entire interior took about 2 or 3 hours. It really wasn't that big a deal. So the thing that's interesting about this is if you think about a model, when you look in these windows, if there's an object on the wall over here, where this blue object is, which would be something on the wall, your viewing angle is so narrow that you can't see depth. So everything being flat actually works well. What I actually figured out after I did this when it was all done was, oh, there's a shadow feature in PowerPoint. I'll show you how you can use that. So you can actually produce shadows if you want to. If you've got lighting, you want to make it look like there's shadows. So the way this works is really simple. You just scan the model as a JPEG or PNG file on your scanner before you assemble it. So what you're seeing here on the right is actually what was on the scanner bed. So literally took the parts, put them flat down, inside down on the scanner, so it scanned the inside walls. So if you look at these 3 walls, this is where they actually sit on the module. But I now have them in a scan in the computer. So I actually have the interior of the building now, and I can make it a set of templates. So that's what I did next. So basically, I brought those scanned images into PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint, which is the same thing you're watching these slides in, because it turns out it's actually a drawing package masquerading as a slide package. You can actually treat a sheet of paper as an 8.5 by 11 drawing space, and you can scale all the objects on it. So basically what I did was imported it in and actually stuck it into this space. And so once you've done that, you can now create a box. So this red box here is actually just a square rectangular image in PowerPoint, and I just moved it to the shape of the building where the walls were. And once you've done that, you now have a template. And inside, if you look at this inside, it's actually made just a little bit bigger than the window space, because my intent was to paint the walls before I installed them. Then when you glue the glue in, as long as the paint and the wall kind of match, you'd have a nice interior mullion when you looked across in the building. I'm going to show you how in a second. In PowerPoint, there's a way you can edit points in a rectangle. So basically, I just took a rectangle here, I edited the points, and I added a point and drug it up to create these other points and make this little space here. So basically, that's how you create essentially the template for the walls is created like this. Okay, and by the way, I'm going to pause if there are any questions or about how you do this. So basically, if you look on the bottom left, this is, you know, another set, the complete set of walls for the building, where these, so there are the 3 walls that were the living room, and then the 4 walls that form the main part of that little house. Okay, so once you've got those in, one comment, and this was experience, you need to reserve a little room on the side of each of these when you do the templates, the interior templates, for when the walls glue together. I actually made them the first time. I made all of my designs the full width, and it turns out that they were actually a little too wide. You actually have to take a little bit off. I did take off enough off the bottom, but I put a floor in the building and actually glued the walls to the floor on the sides. So there was a resin floor. You glued the walls together and then put the floor in from the bottom. So as you do that, you basically now, if you think about what we've done, is we've created a template where that template actually represents the walls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop out of this and I'm going to jump over into another presentation. This is actually not a presentation. This is actually the slide deck that I use to build the walls. So I'm going to drop down here and I'm going to actually show you this because I think it's kind of let me drop way down here. So this slide here, if you look at this slide right here, you'll notice that these red lines here were the template. So basically each one of these is just a square. And I just put it in the template down here in this place. But when you get up here, that now is where the window is going to be. So I started off by saying, well, what if the walls were green? And I decided I really didn't look like that, but I started playing and putting some doors and windows in. But is it clear how you get to this point? Does everyone kind of understand how you get from, you know, the scanner bed to this point where you've got a template? Once you have that, it's really not that hard, just so you understand. So now, let me go up here. You can now begin to put objects into this. So if you look at this object here, the way you find something like that is you go in and you go Victorian wallpaper. And what you do is go look in images. And what you'll find in images is you'll find all these beautiful images of Victorian wallpaper. So, you know, let's say we want to do something fairly fancy. We just pick this one, click once on it, and you now have the image. What you do is go up here and copy it, and that's easy to do by right-clicking, and you hit copy, copy image. And now we can take that image and we can bring it back in here, and I just pasted it in. So we now have that wallpaper. So let's say I said, okay, I want to use that, but you know, I really don't like that pattern. It's too. So now you just copy, and by the way, CV on a computer is your best friends. C copies whatever's highlighted, V pastes it. So I just hit Control CV, and now I can just bring it up here. I can zoom in. Down here is a zoom control at the bottom right. Zoom in, and I just line the patterns up. So I find a place where they match. And I did it very well there, but I think that's close. And now if I click on both of these, I can either hit Control G and group them, or if you're in the home key, if you go up here, you can group these into a group. And now you can do the same thing, CV again, put them up here, find the match point. And say, what I'm using is I'm using the arrow keys to move these now. But now we can group those again, and we now have essentially created a bigger object that can be our wallpaper. And we can, you know, shrink it down if we want to, and we can say, okay, that wallpaper. And then what I'm going to do here is if you notice, let's shrink this down so it fits on the wall. If I click on the door, if I go up here to arrange, and you just look at these tools, if you've used any computer like this, they're pretty easy. Arrange moves the objects around. So I arrange, bring to front, and now the door is in the front. And so I can move this down and say, okay, this was here. And then let's say you wanted wainscoting. You do the same thing. Go to the internet, go look up here and say Victorian wainscoting. Wainscoting, I guess it is. I'm a terrible typist, by the way.
Nobody else here is one of those.
But so now this is a little different because you're not getting the same kind of images. But if you go down through here, eventually you'll start finding things that are really, that's an image you can use. But that's basically how you look for things. By the way, the other thing I wanted to show you here was there's a site called textures.com. So if you haven't gone to this site, if you do any of this kind of stuff, textures.com is a great site. You can sign up here. You have to log on. I think I have to log on. Yeah, let me log in. You can log in and you get basically one medium object or a couple of medium objects a day. But, you know, if you look down here and look, so somebody wanted to do some rusted roofing. You know, let's do some metal roofing. So there are 73 photo sets of metal roofing here. So if you look at this one here, there are 4 images here. So basically, you can download these images. You're getting the small one here, but they're actually, for what we do, very good. And again, you can then take these images and build them into a kind of larger environment if you want to. So I'm going to jump
Phil,
back.
I don't want to interrupt you, Phil, but textures.com is great. I've used that many times for roof texture, and it's terrific.
Absolutely. I'll show you a few pictures later. I actually did a building on the O-scale layout where I grabbed some textures.coms, and I took a piece that in blown up in O-scale would be about this big, and actually built a building about this big just by replicating the panels. You can do some very interesting things with those textures. So basically what you do is you pick the room out, and you'll notice here, this was the drawing you saw. This is what I ended up with. And you'll notice that I got pictures. So if you saw the process, you go find an image. So then the next thing you want is you want a picture frame. So you go look for pictures that have a picture frame you like. You can take the picture frame and put the image you found inside the picture frame, so you get the images for your location inside the frames you want. So if we go back, I'm going to go back. I'm jumping back and forth here because I want you to see how it's done. Hang on, I'm in the...
Just think of it as a series of layering, right?
Right, exactly. So if you look up here, it is literally just layers. So what I wanted to show you is a couple of walls here. So this wall, this is the wall that on one side is the kitchen, and this is where that divider wall is in the middle, that balsa divider wall I showed you. So this is a kitchen wall, and this is the bedroom wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit so you can see what the objects are. So, this is wallpaper. So I'm going to ungroup this so you can see that, each one of these is now a separate group. So you see that piece is there. This piece is here. Now, if you look at this painting, if we go up here, arrange, ungroup. And by the way, if anybody wants, anybody can have this PowerPoint, this thing to start with and play with. What you see is that this was a picture I got of the mission, and this was a picture I found online. And you notice that I actually took two of them and used the crop tool. So there's another really cool tool, and these are easy to use, is if you hit the left mouse button on a PC, on an object, you open up this other window here. One of the tools you get is this thing called a crop tool. And what the crop tool does is it lets you shrink or grow the image, what's shown. And so see, what I did was I took this image, I cropped it from 2 dimensions, slid it down until it was a picture frame that was just right. I'm not going to get it perfect, but just right for that picture. So basically, that's how you build up images. And if you look over here, like in the kitchen, I wanted this kind of blue motif. When I was a kid, we had these Danish plates. So that's actually a Danish plate. This is actually what I realized afterwards, is you can put in shape effects. So there's a shadow effect. So you can put a shadow effect that actually puts, so I could have put on all of these a shadow effect. So when you looked in the window, you actually would see a shadow on the wall behind everything. So it's actually a really, if you've ever used these kind of tools, it's actually a pretty easy way to do it. So basically, this is finding patterns. There's a whole bunch of things in here in the presentation about how to do that when you go back. This was textures.com. This is basically the process. I put it in. You've kind of seen this in the presentation. I wanted to put in here. So you start with the templates on the right. Then you start filling in the templates with objects. Then you generate final prints. Those are all sized at 8.5 by 11. So I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And then these were the final printouts for the walls. I wanted to put these up, and then Earl had a couple. I was at the PCR convention we had up in Sacramento. Someone, I don't remember who, did a session on using these Costco 60-inch by 20-inch prints for a backdrop. And I needed to build a city for the layout in a full city for the layout in Pleasanton. The O-scale layout there for 20 years had a huge city area, but never had a city. And when I saw that technique, it hit me, gee, if I could print buildings on the paper, you could actually build a city pretty quickly. So basically I went online, found a bunch of buildings. I think I printed 6 prints for this, six of those, or 6 or 7. Basically printed the prints out, cut them out using a hobby knife and a small small square. They were then mounted to masonite. So I just bought basic masonite, glued these to masonite with photo glue, and then those were just mounted with hot glue actually to sticks. And if you look over here on the right, that's actually all those buildings literally screwed on from the back to the benchwork. So between the front row of buildings and the back row, there's a pit there where where you can operate the trolley that runs around up there. So basically they're just mounted there, but the public is constrained to seeing this from about 12 feet away. And it turns out, other than a little bit of shine, it really looks pretty good. But like, if you look at this brick building on the corner here, which is actually just 3 masonite pieces basically locked together with some corner pieces, that literally was about 5 or 6 different prints on textures that were regrouped to build a whole building. So that's kind of how you can do that. So that's kind of the end of what I had. Earl, I think you were going to share, you were going to talk about how you'd use the same techniques.
Quick question, Phil.
Sure.
Would shooting those buildings with an artist flat medium knock the shine down?
I hit them. I actually tried it. I hit them with it once. I probably should do it again. It knocks it down a little bit. The challenge we have in the club is that we have lights, and they're all LED spotlight or floodlights up on the overhead, and they shine down, and the buildings are up just enough angle where those are actually hitting and shining back toward the viewers.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yep. But anyway, it's just by the way, using it for backdrops I thought was brilliant. So give it to Earl.
So I just have a short presentation. Phil and I didn't talk about what each person was doing. So this is what I do a lot for HO scale interiors. Sometimes you have an attic or a storefront and you need a picture. So what I do is first come in here and draw a text box. And this is the area that I have to work with. And you can come in here and you do right click and you go to size. So let's say I've got an area that's 1 inch by 3 inches. So and you want to put a line around the outside of it so you can see it. So this is the area that I have to work with that I want to find an image for. So I went on the web, just like Phil did, and found an image. This is a pharmacy interior.
So, quick question, what program are you using?
I'm sorry, I'm using Publisher.
Yeah, so just for everybody, so PowerPoint is a slide production. Publisher is more of a document publication. But the point is exactly the same. If you can create objects on a page, you can now put things in them and print them.
Yeah, and basically the same set of drawing tools are available across the Microsoft Office suite. So if you know how to do it in PowerPoint, you pretty much know how to do it in Publisher, Word, and Excel.
Right. And, PowerPoint and Publisher are nice because things don't move. When you start doing it in Word, Word moves things and it messes you up. So what I'm doing here is scaling this down to about the size that I want. And you can bring this screen over and kind of see how big your image is. And I can zoom that in and we can play with all. So that's how I do the interiors. Then like Phil was showing, you can come in here, crop it, get rid of what you don't need. And then
for those of you who are really cheap like me, Apache OpenOffice, which is free, has the same apps.
Yep. Yeah. By the way, no endorsement of apps here. Literally, if you can find a drawing tool and create an 8.5 by 11 page in it, and you can scale things, you can use it to print stuff that's pretty cool.
Yeah. The other thing is this little orange box over here. And I'll get zoomed in again. This is 6 foot tall in HO. So if you're worried about, is what you have kind of in scale, you just create a box that's 6 feet tall and you can put it in here and see if it's going to scale properly. Back to you, Phil.
That's a great idea, Earl.
I was just going to show. So, by the way, if you're in PowerPoint, if you use PowerPoint for any of these things, if you go up, one thing to do is go to the design bar. And on the design bar, you can pick your slide size. And so if you notice, what I've done is I've actually made, this is a widescreen size. But if we go over to the other presentation, the one that's actually the printed interiors, first thing I do is I go over to slide and change it from a slideshow. You change this to letter paper. So when you pull this list down for the size, so it's design, slide size, you want to select letter paper, and then it scales it to letter. And the other thing that you also can do on all these programs is if you come down here to like this door and you say, okay, I want to see what size that door is. If you click on it and you go up here, it says size and position. This again, in Microsoft, you always look for these things. They always say the same things. Great comment. If you do that, it opens up the size of the object over here. And so you got the same thing. You got the measurement of the object and you can rotate it. One of the nice things is you can scale it. So if you bring 5 things over and you want to maintain the scale, you can scale them all by 50% and they'll all get half the size. The other thing you can do that when you play with these things, if you put a square here like this, the square is actually a series of points. So if you want to, you can change those points and then do it the same way. You right click on it. When you right click on it, it opens up this toolbar and you notice there's a point there that says edit points. So any object is actually just points. So if you look at that, because I had edit points, you see those 4 black dots are points, and each one of these points, if you click on it, is actually 2 little arms. And by the way, does anybody know what that looks like? Looks an awful lot like a graduated curve on a layout. And in fact, it's a great tool. I'll show you how you can do a track for a layout real quickly. So you take and you put a line. If you want to do it, a module. All my module drawings are done in PowerPoint. You do a line. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here in this tool and I'm going to look at the line. And you notice the line over here is 0.5 points wide. But if you look, there's a compound type. And I can make this line a double line. And if I make it 6 points, actually I use 5.5, it turns out, and I make it black, turns out that starts to look a lot like a railroad track. And like I said, if you take a really simple object up here, so they have a whole bunch of objects you can use, but you can grab a tool that right here that makes basically a polygon, a freeform shape. And what you can do is you can go like this. Oh, hang on, I didn't do that right. We'll use that, it's okay. So if I made that, that's a shape. But what it really is it was really 3 points. So you notice I'm going to go grab this point up here and I'm just going to move it down here. But what's really interesting about these points are that if I go to one of these, if I move this one over here, I can take this one and go like this, and I can take this one and go like this, and I'm actually starting to create graduated curves. And again, if I come over here and I go like this, and I make this 5.5, that starts to look again a lot like a track. And so, you can start using these tools. You can do lots of really interesting drawings with these things. Just play with them a little bit. And, if you have Office 365, one of the open things, you have these tools on your computer already. So, well, that was it for me. I'm done.
Well, that was awesome.
Looks like it's just
That was an awesome presentation,
yeah, it's
Phil.
just a way of using what you have very creatively. I think you did a good job, Phil.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think it's a great tool. And by the way, scanner, so, if you guys, I'm not sharing, so let me pull something up. I'll pull up one drawing here and show you what you can do, some of the other things you can do with it.
Bill, that was a great presentation. Yeah, I've been using PowerPoint and Publisher for quite a while, and I learned a couple things today.
Well, that's good.
One thing I'm doing on mock-ups, like when I do my building mock-ups, I go and take the titchy windows that I'm going to be using and put them on the scanner bed, scan it, print it,
Yep.
and cut it out and put it on the mock-up.
Yep. So I'm going to share again. This is here, let me share. I'll show you guys the. So when I do a module design, I actually use the same tools. So this is, if you go down here, you can't actually. I don't think I've got. I'm going very fast, but like this is as I was going through designs. You can just repeat things very easily. And all of these things are just objects. So like you saw this is a switch. This is actually grabbed off of the internet, though I actually scanned some of the switches the same way. So if you notice this one here, that's a Fast Tracks template. So if you go to the Fast Track site, they have templates. The templates are PDFs. You can download the PDF and then you can copy it and paste it and scale it into these kind of packages. So this is an accurately scaled. This is 1 inch and goes 1 foot on this drawing. So it's a 8.5 by 11 page. So you can put an 8-foot module across it, or a 10-foot module across it. But this one here, if you look at this switch here, that's actually scanned. That actually, I took the switch and I put it upside down on the scanner bed and scanned it and then imported it and scaled it. But it becomes really easy to create these objects and just put them into a drawing. And everything that's here is just a series of things you can put together. And then I do the same thing for, like, these are all building mock-ups. And so again, the same, if you just look at this, they're just a series of pieces of, you just take that out. That was a piece that was designed to fill in. These are roof pieces. Again, those are grouped together. The way that's done is you make one and you decide the angle of your roof. By the way, we want to know what the angle of the roof is. We go over and do size and position. Always remember size and position. Boom, it's 246 degrees. I don't know what normal was. We'd have to figure out. So if we put it to 0, 270, so it was 14 degrees. That's a 14-degree roof angle. Again, CV, learn CV. Just try doing, next time you're in any of these things, hit Control CV. That copied it. Always, if you want to arrange anything, you click on Arrange. Look for the word Arrange. If you notice, it says Rotate Horizontal. Notice it just went horizontal. And now I can just take this piece and put it up here with this piece. And now I do put those together, hit Control G to group them, or you can group them under Arrange. And that's how you create that piece there. And I just kind of align it on there. And then somewhere I had the other piece that I put. That's literally how long. Once you get a few objects together, you can build stuff really quickly. And it lets you really do, like the mock-ups you're doing, you almost do the whole mock-up this way and print out and 8 out. Like a mock of a building could be built, and even if it's bigger than the 11 inches, you can then break it and print it on 2 sheets, print those out, and just glue those on your mock-up. When I do my mock-ups, that's what I'm planning on doing, is doing it that way. Yep.
This is one of my mock-ups.
Yep. It's cool.
Very nice.
And it's so important because, I think especially for folks that have this duality of building a layout and wanting scenery, but also wanting to have something that they can operate on. A lot of folks end up in a situation where, you get the basics of the layout, but structures and that become a longer term, project activity. This is a great way to generate mock-ups that might be good enough. Combine it with the paper building techniques that are really good. Anyway, cool. Anybody else got anything else? We're kind of see if anybody else has anything else. We'll wrap up for the day probably.
In one of the clinics, Joe Fugate has a new way of, I forget what his layout, building its tops or something like that. But he mentioned something that maybe is useful to everybody. He says, and it's apropos of what you're talking about. He says, while you don't have a layout, maybe you ought to start building structures so that when your layout is there, you don't have this lag time to putting structures on the layout, because structures do take a lot of time.
Yep.
Yeah, Joe Fugate's thing is TOMA, T-O-M-A, the one
Okay.
module approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, which actually is a sectional layout approach. It's not truly modular.
Mhm.
But you know, it's kind of interesting, you know, having kind of being a semi-newbie, returning to the hobby, and having built a layout before in a 10 by 12 bedroom, and then left for 15 years, came back and doing modular. The thing I didn't appreciate about modular is the repetitive learning cycle you get after you built about 3 or 4 modules. So I'm on the ones I'm building now are actually realistic, probably my 5th and 6th modules. And because every time you build a module, it's literally like building a layout in microcosm, right? You've got bench work, you've got underlayment for scenery, you've got your railroad, you've got your underlayment for the rails, you've got your road bed, you've got your rail system, you've got your electronics. Now you've got to do scenery, you've got to do layered scenery, you've got to do dirt, you got to do your vegetation, you got to do structures. And you do that for 4 feet, and then you do it for the next 4 feet. And it's very interesting. You can see it in the modules, but I really see it more than you do of saying, well, I know if I'd done that again now, how different I would have done it. And that's even somebody who kind of knew a lot going in about modeling and, you know, has done reasonable. But every time I do it, and I think that's a huge advantage. There was an article in Model Railroader about learning in a, you know, on a board. It was basically on an 8 by 6, an 8 inch, a 6 foot long 2 by 8, I think it was. But I think that's kind of the nice thing about modular is you by going through that repetitive process, every time you do it, you learn something that when you do it the next time, you do it differently. Like the first couple of modules I did, I thought, well, the logical way to do this, I got a 4 foot module. I'm going to put a barrier strip in the middle. I'm going to run all the wires to that. If you look under the newest module, it comes in and I put a pair of bus wires for the bus distribution because the mains go through. Basically, have the mains go through and then there's a connection with the light. But the buses now are just buses because it's so much easier when you put all the drops down instead of running them 2 feet over to here, just to run them 6 inches down to those buses. And I learned that because I saw those underneath layouts and I saw on layout tours where they were drilled and said, why wouldn't you do the same on a module? So that kind of learning, I think only happens as you do things repeatedly. And I think that's the cool thing about modules, I would say. And it kind of the TOMA is the same thing, right? You build one module. Mm-hmm. And I think I read someone saying that by the time they got to the 5th module, they realized they had to rebuild the first module, right? Because
yep, that's absolutely right.
And so it's exactly the same thing.
That's what I've been doing this past week is rebuilding some modules because I learned a bunch in the first 20 that I built. Like the one that's in my background there, that was originally built by Jim Fitzgerald back in the 1970s. And I remodeled it, reshaped it, and relayed some of the track. The classification tracks are all hand-laid code 55, but the through tracks I redid to Pico code 55 so that they would match the rest of my modules.
Cool. Paul, you should take a bunch of pictures and walk us through that in 2 weeks. I'd love to see how you do. I'd love to see how you do what you're doing with that.
Yeah, I should do that. I've just got to get the camera together to do it because I'm working on a project now. I just stripped an old module and I'm going to start rebuilding.
But that would be great to have some pictures of that while you're doing. I mean, seeing how your thought process have changed and why you're doing something different. I think that's a learning that we can all learn from. You know, that one thing. So if you think about it and send me an email if you're willing to basically do just what Steve did. It's really just show some pictures and have some conversation. It's really talking to people about what you've done, and that'd be great.
Yeah, I should do that. And actually, I had been working on a clinic too, which I sort of did the basic version of it in Portland 2015. But how this can actually help beginners to get involved too, because you just got to learn a little bit about each of the techniques.
Right.
As
Exactly.
you go, and it keeps you in a sort of a flow situation when you're building your layout.
By the way, just a comment on clinics. So the slides that I showed, the said slide, Matt, there's basically a base set of those that I can send you. Seth actually used those when he did his little talk about structured wiring. If anyone would like to do a little clinic, I'll send you the slides. If you can edit them, and I'll help you put them together. So if anyone, Paul, if anyone would like to do a clinic, and by the way, a clinic that you do during these events qualifies for the achievement awards for clinics. So I think it's on the author side. You get an author credit for it. So it's a good thing to do.
The best part about this, I think, is that, you know, for someone who's just starting, there's a lot of trial and error. But if they find a resource like this, it's more trial and less error because you're learning from what everybody else figured out. It's really great.
Well, you know, I've always thought about the other idea of, if you had a space, could you have a modular group where people built 4-foot modules and you come together, you know, so you put your module in the car, come together and work on modules for a Saturday as a group. And then, you know, so everybody was kind of doing different. So you kind of did the concept of a round robin instead of going to different places. The idea we do like we do at a show, bring modules together and work on them together. Haven't ever really gotten around to that, but it's an interesting thought process.
The Fremo N scale guys before the lockdown were doing a lot of that, where they'd go over to some place and they would work together, maybe do a weekend of bench work and get the modules up, and then they do a wiring one, and they do a scenery one.
Yep.
And get it all together. So yeah, there are groups that are trying that, and it works very well.
Yep. Cool.
And the Yosemite Shoreline also did that when we're building up the Yosemite Shoreline.
Yep. Yeah, and the Yosemite Shoreline, I know they have like a Saturday work session on the Yosemite Shoreline modules occasionally. So, and we've done a couple of, the CCCs, we've done it primarily for building bench work, not so much for the rest of it. But I think it is, there's often one part of modeling that's intimidating to people. You know, if you think about all the steps in the process, from building layout through to, you know, the track work, to electrical, to base scenery, to structures, to, it seems to me that there's almost something, I know there are certain things when I get to it, I have a lot of trepidation about, because I don't feel comfortable with that. And so I think that the idea of being in a modular area where you could have somebody help you with that would be really cool. So anyway, just some thoughts.
Yeah, and it's also nice for sharing tools too. Like if you're doing a bunch of bench work and all you have is hand tools, but somebody else has got a table saw, it's really helpful.
Well, I have to say, as Charles will say, the best thing you can have for bench work is somebody with a cabinet shop. Guys, I don't know if you know, we went over to Dave's shop to build modules. And the last time he had all the parts cut because he just had his guys cut the parts because he doesn't want us using the saws. But he's got a saw where you walk up to it and there's a button and you enter to hundredths of an inch how long you want the part, and the little stop moves. And then you slide the wood in and you put, there on the floor, there's a foot trigger, and you push the foot trigger and the saw pneumatically comes up and cuts the board. And you go boom, 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 boom. Just one hand in, one hand out. You can cut 20 pieces in a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole different thing than what we do in our shops. So you can build stuff really interesting that way.
Yep. Well, guys, it's bio break time.
Yeah.
See you later.
Excellent. See you, Ken. So we will meet 2 weeks from now. I will send out, we'll put the announcement. The announcement's going to be, by the way, it's the same meetup URL. So if you actually go back into your browser and bookmark the URL, so when you clicked on the thing, it opened your browser and opened a browser window, and then that opened this. If you take that browser window and just bookmark it in your bookmarks, 2 weeks from Saturday, you just click on the bookmark and it'll open the meeting. It's the same URL every 2 weeks, so you never have to go find it. The next meeting invite should be on the website. I think Pete is probably going to change. We'll probably change it in the newsletter as well once we get the next one laid out. And Paul, contact me quick because I want to put it in there in the announcement. And I'll send an email out 2 weeks from yesterday on Friday announcing it, but we'll do one 2 weeks from now. So with that, I'll bid everybody adieu. Have a great week and model some great stuff for 2 weeks from now.
Great.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks,
Well,
guys.
thanks,
Bye.
Phil.
Session.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.